Progress.
Good morning from Hong Kong. I am S. Alice Meng, Executive Director of Asia Society Hong Kong Center, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our Reimagining the Future series. The idea for this series is that in a world full of uncertainties from the global pandemic that we're all living through right now, Sino-US tensions, climate change, and ethnic and racial tension, and etc., how can we reframe some of these issues and help to address some of these problems from a different perspective and a different lens? We have a wonderful panel this morning joining us online, and they are Mr. Allan B. Gepty, Assistant Secretary, Department of Trade and Industry, Philippines, and Mr. Brian Low, Director General of Trade and Industry, Hong Kong S.A.R. And moderating for us is our old great friend, Ms. Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief, CEO, and founder of Forkast.News. Before we get started, I want to thank our event partners, Philippine Trade and Investment Center, Hong Kong, and Invest Hong Kong, and the Philippine Consulate General in Hong Kong. And now I would like to hand it over to the Consul General, Mr. Raleigh L. Tejeda. And if you have any questions for the panelists, please submit them through the Slido link listed in the online, listed in the program. So thank you so much for joining us, and Consul General.
A good day to all participants in Hong Kong, the Philippines, and around the world. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar entitled Reimagining the Future series, Trade and Rsep, Scaling Up ASEAN Trade Collaboration. I'm also very grateful to the Honorable Assistant Secretary Allan Gepty of the Department of Trade and Industry of the Philippines and the Honorable Brian Low, Director General of Trade and Industry of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of China, for accepting our invitation to share their thoughts and insights in this event. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership is the world's largest free trade agreement, which accounts for half of the world's population and 1/3 of its GDP. It consolidates smaller existing agreements to create a comprehensive partnership fit for the 21st century. As the largest FTA in the world, the RCEP will open new opportunities for trade and investment, shore up business confidence, and secure our region's recovery. The RCEP comprises a diverse group of countries between the 10 ASEAN member states and 5 of ASEAN's external partners, namely Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and China. This shows how free and open trade and investments are in the common interest of all economies, regardless of their development stages. RCEP is an ASEAN-centric and ASEAN-led agreement. Thus, ASEAN plays an important role in RCEP. Its leadership as a trusted and neutral group has enabled RCEP members to cooperate and come together in an unprecedented way. The RCEP surely makes bilateral or trilateral trade deals between and among members a breeze. For all members like the Philippines, the RCEP will provide a lot of benefits, such as good market access, cheaper cost of capital goods, raw materials, intermediate goods, and ultimately goods for consumers. In addition, exporters from member states will be able to use only one set of rules. RCEP will definitely present a more stable and predictable business environment which would attract more investments. As one of the most externally oriented economies and most important commercial hubs in the world, Hong Kong is destined to play an important part in RCEP. Time and again, the Philippines, as a member of RCEP, has expressed its unwavering support to Hong Kong's admission as a member of RCEP. Thus, the Philippines eagerly looks forward to Hong Kong's membership in RCEP in the near future. In conclusion, it is my hope that today's webinar can enlighten participants on the benefits and advantages of RCEP, including what it could contribute to securing Hong Kong's continued prosperity. I wish everyone a fruitful and stimulating series of discussions. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It is a great pleasure to be here. As we heard from the Consul General, RCEP will connect about 30% of the world's people, and it is estimated to add $209 billion annually to the world income and $500 billion to world trade by 2030. Now, that's significant impact here. And as we sit in Hong Kong in the eve of the possible inclusion and future membership in RCEP, we wanted to explore what this all means for the city, for the region, for this side of the globe in Asia societies, hashtag reimagining the future series. It is my great pleasure to be here. Thank you to Alice Mong of the Asia Society for that warm introduction. I'm Angie Lau, Forkast.News editor-in-chief of Forkast.News. We are a Hong Kong-based global digital media platform that covers emerging technologies at the intersection of business, politics, economy. It is my honor to help lead this conversation. Joining me is, as you've heard, Allan B. Gepty, currently the Assistant Secretary for Industry Development and Trade Policy of the Department of Trade and Industry, and Brian Leo, Director General of Trade and Industry of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. So welcome, gentlemen, for this very exciting conversation. I'd like to give you each an opportunity to share with our audience here. About 3 minutes, share with us the roles of Hong Kong and Philippines in RCEP respectively. And Brian, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you, Angie, and good morning, Alan. It's really nice to have a chance to talk about Hong Kong's role in RCEP. Hong Kong enjoys close trade and investment relations with RCEP member economies and has signed FTAs, free trade agreements, with 13 of the 15th RCEP member economies, namely the 10 ASEAN member states, the mainland China, Australia, and New Zealand. Hong Kong is well placed to contribute and add value to RCEP. As a staunch supporter of free and open trade, Hong Kong shares the rationale behind the formation of RCEP and is committed to broadening and deepening regional economic integration and cooperation, which in turn would promote prosperity of the region and help to accelerate the recovery of global economy in the post-pandemic era. Hong Kong's accession to RCEP would bring immense mutual benefits to the region and bring regional economic cooperation to a new height. In particular, Hong Kong's accession to RCEP will provide an additional platform for promoting trade and investment between ASEAN and Hong Kong, on top of the ASEAN-Hong Kong-China Free Trade Agreement. Economically, given the complementary nature of Hong Kong and ASEAN, there is a huge potential for synergy and partnership among our businesses under the RCEP platform upon Hong Kong's accession. In addition, Hong Kong's accession will help further consolidate the regional supply chain through our provision of more access and choices of high-quality services to enterprises in the region, enabling businesses to reap the full benefits of regional economic integration. As Hong Kong is one of the major providers of foreign direct investment, our participation in RCEP will also encourage investment flows and stimulate economic activities in the region, thereby contributing to regional integration and economic growth. And in fact, Hong Kong is ranked 4th globally by foreign direct investment outflow in 2020, with $102 billion in value. We look forward to further strengthening our close ties, trade and investment relations, and bring mutual benefits to the region through Hong Kong's early accession to RCEP after its entry into force. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Allan, I welcome you to share remarks on how you think the role of Philippines in RCEP could be a meaningful one for the region.
Thank you, Angie. Good morning. Good morning also, Brian, and to all the listeners, and of course, my utmost gratitude to the organizers of this forum. I just want to give context to the question, Angie. First, let me emphasize that the 21st century is the resurgence of Asia. In recent years, Asia has been the chatter of economic activities, from research and development, product development, to production and manufacturing. And because of this development, we have observed geopolitical tensions, triggered, among others, by competition in the economic spectrum. Thus, inward policies and protectionism became prevalent, and the rules-based system of international trade has been challenged. Under the situation, the role of ASEAN becomes more important and crucial. This is because ASEAN is at the center of these economic activities happening in Asia. And on this note, RCEP, as an ASEAN-led FTA, is intended to maintain ASEAN centrality and maintain the center of economic activities in the region, not to mention provide the regional balance of power. Therefore, we should look at RCEP not just as a plain trade agreement that provides enhanced market access and stable business environment. It is a strategic tool to sustain the region's economic advantage. ASEAN has to be in the mainstream of global economy. Hence, there is a need for it to expand regional economic integration via FTAs with its external partners. And the RCEP is expected to promote economic efficiency of member states, linking their strengths in manufacturing, technology, agriculture, and natural resources, and it will reinforce their global value chain network. Moreover, amidst the rise in protectionism, RCEP signifies the region's unwavering commitment to an open, free, fair, inclusive, and rules-based trading system. Now, the question is, where do we see the Philippines in this development, and also Hong Kong as a new FTA partner of ASEAN? For the Philippines, it bears to note that like Hong Kong, it is mainly a trading nation. Notably, in Southeast Asia and in the RCEP region, the Philippines has a strategic advantage both with respect to place and people. On place, the Philippines adopts an open market policy for trade and investment. It adheres strongly to the rules-based system. In fact, even during the height of the pandemic, it did not adopt and implement any export restrictions or prohibitions, unlike other economies that immediately embrace a protectionist stance by imposing certain restrictions. Prior to the pandemic, according to Oxford Economics in 2019, the Philippines is ranked second in the 10 leading emerging markets that will dominate the global economy in the next decade. And I think, notwithstanding the pandemic, the fundamental elements are there. It remains a bright spot in Asia. Even during the pandemic, in terms of economic reforms, the efforts of the national government remains. Thus, last year, we passed the CREATE Act, which lowers the corporate income tax from 30% to 25% and 20%, and provides a bunch of incentives in the form of additional tax deductions, such as expenses on research and development, power, and capacity building. Other structural reforms were recently certified urgent by the President, including amendments to the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, Public Services Act, and the Foreign Investment Act. These measures will further liberalize the economy and address market distortions, improving the country's competitiveness and facilitating post-pandemic recovery. It may be recalled also that in 2010, the Philippines issued the 11th Foreign Investment Negative List, which will help raise the country's competitiveness by opening up more areas for foreign investment into the country, particularly those that will introduce new technology and stimulate innovation. Also, in the Philippines, there is a growing environment for startup, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And this is one asset and, of course, advantage that we can, of course, position ourselves in the region. In fact, as to programs, we have Filipino Innovation, Kubo, Slingshot, Idea Space, Synergy, among others. This is not to mention that the Philippines is very strong in services, particularly business services, contributing to about 60% of our GDP. And as the gateway to ASEAN and ASEAN Plus 6 markets, the Philippines offers an expanded market for investors. And the Philippines' participation in RCEP is a signal that it wants to expand and enhance its trade relations, not only to RCEP parties, but even to non-RCEP parties. On people, the Philippines is in a demographic sweet spot, as majority of its population are of working age, outnumbering its dependents. The median age is about 24 years old. The facility with the English language is another competitive advantage, which is vital in education and capacity building. Moreover, investors can take advantage of our large domestic market, which is around 107 million. In the area of knowledge-based economy, One important element is also people. And if I may highlight, in 2014, there was an article in Bloomberg Businessweek magazine entitled Silicon Valley Imports Its Brains. Where do they come from? And interestingly, the Philippines ranked number 6. But if it will be on a country-to-country basis, the Philippines is actually ranked number 3. This reflects the level of intelligence and creativity of Filipinos. And given the growing innovation ecosystem in the country, a Silicon Valley in the Philippines may not be far-fetched. Given these two key advantages, we made sure that the business environment remains conducive, necessary to position the country as an ideal innovation and investment hub in the region. Our financial and business services sectors remain competitive. That is why we make sure that their concerns are addressed, including provisions of rules and disciplines necessary to provide stability and predictability in their sectors. That is why we joined the WTO Joint Initiative on E-commerce, and we also look forward to the implementation of the RCEP agreement, where a comprehensive chapter on e-commerce is included. We see RCEP not only as a catalyst for economic development in this time of pandemic, but also as a tool to empower our stakeholders seize the growing opportunities in the region. Thus, we welcome Hong Kong's interest to join this mega free trade deal. And we see Hong Kong as a strategic partner in many areas, such as fintech, IP commercialization, wealth management, and even infrastructure investment. Thus, if ASEAN is heading towards expansion and deeper regional economic integration, Hong Kong as a link in the flow of capital, investments, technology, and even people becomes more relevant. Thank you, Angie.
Allan, thank you so much. I reflect on some of those remarks, and you brought up the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's almost poetic that while we feel so physically isolated from each other because of the concerns about the spread of the pandemic, that this is a trade pact that continues to whir on in the background. That it continues to open up borders and potentially trade as well across the region. I want to touch on the COVID-19 pandemic. It's an important one for all of us on a personal level and on a professional level and on a regional level. It's made a great impact on economic activities. Brian, I wonder if you could answer this first. Has the trade between Hong Kong and ASEAN been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you, Angie. I think, well, yes, indeed. The COVID-19 pandemic has been rampant for almost 2 years now and caused significant impact on global economic activities. And there's no exception in Hong Kong. While our total merchandise trade with the world was hard hit by the global downturn, which resulted in a year-on-year decrease of 2.5% in 2020. The trade and economic relations between Hong Kong and ASEAN remains robust, which marked a moderate increase of 1.6%. The growth continued and took a great leap in the first half of 2021, marking a phenomenal growth in year-on-year trade in goods of 21% to reach $76 billion. This was contributed part and partial by the bilateral trade between Hong Kong and the Philippines in this period, which experienced a rocket jump by almost 30%, amounting to $7.2 billion. At the same time, ASEAN has been an attractive investment location for Hong Kong enterprises. ASEAN as a whole was the 4th largest destination of Hong Kong's outward direct investment, amounting to 535 billion Hong Kong dollars at end 2019. By individual economy, the Philippines was among the top 20 largest recipient countries of investment from Hong Kong. With the entry into force of the ASEAN-Hong Kong-China Free Trade Agreement in full, I'm sure that the trade and economic relations between Hong Kong and ASEAN, including the Philippines, will continue to flourish and prosper in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Same question for you, Allan. Have you felt that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the Philippines' economic recovery? And what is the role of RCEP in that recovery as well?
Thank you, Angie. Well, number one, the Philippines' participation in RCEP becomes more relevant as we work towards economic recovery. As we have noted, the pandemic has demonstrated the need for resilient supply chains, a clear regulatory regime for trade and innovative solutions to evolving trade concerns. Thus, the rules and disciplines in RCEP can help address these challenges. We expect also that the agreement will strengthen the region's value chains, facilitate investment, and boost trade of participating economies. And of course, in the process, it will drive the region's inclusive and sustainable economic growth. For the Philippines, you have to bear in mind that the RCEP region basically represents 50% of our market in terms of exports. And in terms of import sources, 68% is being represented by the RCEP region. This means that for PH to further expand its market access to the RCEP region and ensure market access for cheaper raw materials and intermediate goods to sustain and improve its export and local industries, it is imperative for the country to be part of this largest free trade area. Note that of the imported products we source from our trading partners, particularly from the RCEP region, at least 50% of these imports are intermediate goods. Therefore, this is important to our manufacturing sector. So in terms of recovery, definitely the RCEP agreement will be a vital element. Thank you.
It is so meaningful for a lot of people to hear how these trade developments can actually accelerate the recovery, because so many across the region have felt the economic impact. The ASEAN Hong Kong China Free Trade Agreement, or AHK FTA, and the Investment Agreement, AHKIA, have entered into force gradually since June 2019. Brian, what are the key benefits of the two agreements for Hong Kong and ASEAN? How do we think about this in the framework of reimagining the future?
Yes, thank you, Angie. The agreements for certain ASEAN member states have entered into force since June 2019, and for all, as from February this year. The agreements are comprehensive in scope, encompassing trading goods, trading services, investment, economic and technical cooperation, dispute settlement mechanism, and other related areas. So generally speaking, the agreements bring legal certainty, better market access, and fair and equitable treatment in trade and investment, thus creating new business opportunities and further enhancing trade and investment flows between Hong Kong and ASEAN. On trading goods, ASEAN member states commit to progressively eliminate or reduce their customs duties on goods originated from Hong Kong on a wide range of products, including apparel and clothing accessories, precious metal and jewelry, as well as food and beverages, etc. Amongst others, the Philippines commits to eliminate customs duties of about 61% of its tariff lines within 3 years, and another 20% of its tariff lines within 10 years. Hong Kong enterprises in export trade can benefit from the progressive reduction of duties. On trading services, our service providers can enjoy better market access and legal certainty in a wide range of services sectors as committed by ASEAN member states, such as professional services, business services, telecommunication services, construction and related engineering services, education services, financial services, tourism and travel-related services, transport services, and arbitration services. Meanwhile, the ASEAN-Hong Kong-China Investment Agreement complements the ASEAN-Hong Kong-China Free Trade Agreement by providing Hong Kong investors with non-discriminatory treatment of investment in non-services sectors and protection of investments in all sectors in respect of their investment in ASEAN. Thank you.
That's great. And I just want to welcome as well the audience. We're getting a lot of great questions from the audience. And I do want to remind you that there is an opportunity for you to participate in this conversation. And I do note that there are some really great questions, of which I will be asking our two very esteemed panelists shortly. But Allan, I want to follow up on what Brian was saying about how this trade agreement really affects different aspects, at least for Hong Kong. In your view, how does RCEP impact different sectors in the Filipino economy?
Thank you, Angie. In terms of impact, I think it would depend on the sector and also the degree of utilization of these various free trade agreements, including, of course, RCEP and the ASEAN Hong Kong Free Trade Agreement and the ASEAN Hong Kong Investment Agreement. Because we have to bear in mind that in a trade agreement, basically, what we are undertaking is that the stability of the business environment. In other words, we know that when you conduct business, when you conduct trade in my country or in the region for that matter, the rules of the game will not just be unilaterally altered or whimsically altered for that matter. So in other words, that's what the investors and business persons are looking for. Now, these trade agreements offers that degree of stability and predictability. And I think with what happened in this time of pandemic, we have realized that many countries immediately, as an instinctive reaction, adopted an inward policy because they want to conserve resources. But in the process, we realized that we cannot afford to isolate ourselves in this time of crisis. In fact, with more reasons that we have to open our market for trade and investment. In other words, the globalization has already taught us to be integrated and to work together. And that values the importance of an open policy in terms of trade and investment. And with the signing of the agreement of particularly the RCEP agreement, I'm referring to that, in the midst of the pandemic, then that gives a signal that here in the region, we are serious when it comes to rules-based system. Now, as to the impact, then that would boost confidence now to our industries, our businesses, that notwithstanding these challenging times, they can rest assured that the governments are working together to offer a better environment for them. Thank you.
That is significant. You note, Allan, in your opening remarks that the biggest advantage right now for the Philippines is its demographic weight on young people. There's just an incredible, working population. 60%, I think you mentioned, was under 25 years old. That is a significant, essentially benefit and resource for the Philippines. I note that ASEAN and Hong Kong China Free Trade Agreement includes a chapter on economic and technical cooperation. Allan, can you tell me, for this young generation, is this an opportunity to overcome skills gaps? Is this an opportunity to share more, to educate more? What are your thoughts?
Well, economic and technical cooperation in any agreement is very important because that provides platform, not just to share experiences and insights. In the process, you can also transfer and learn technology. And with the technology right now, particularly of the internet, basically the knowledge economy has been revolutionized. I mean, I don't have to go to Hong Kong to learn some new technology, nor Hong Kong people go to Philippines to learn new technology. But again, of course, close collaboration will further enhance. But the good thing is that we have that platform. Now, on skills gap, skills also evolve because of the fast-paced technology, right? Advancement in technology right now. So in other words, in digital skills, for example, while we embrace new technologies, it is imperative for us to also boost human capital development. That is why upskilling, reskilling of people is very important. Now, in my preliminary statement earlier, I highlighted the fact that in the case of the Philippines, we are also very strong when it comes to digital skills. And I even cited the study in 2014 conducted by Bloomberg Businessweek magazine, wherein in Silicon Valley, when it comes to software development, IT skills for that matter, Philippines has been in the top 3 for purposes of sourcing the brains of Silicon Valley. And in the Philippines, we know that advantage. That's why we are in the process, and we have intensified the process of creating that conducive environment for innovation and startup. So here we know that Hong Kong is also very strong on this. And when you talk about technology, you cannot afford not to talk also about technology in financial services, digital banking for that matter, wealth management. And this is the niche of Hong Kong. And Philippines can definitely collaborate with Hong Kong on this. That's why we see Hong Kong as a strong partner. And that's the good thing about this, Angie, is that Hong Kong and Philippines are good links in the region for ASEAN and also on other integrated economic regions, as of course, you have the Belt and Road Initiative also, that would really complement each other in the process.
We already see those relationships really nurturing, particularly to your point, over the past half a decade. We've seen that evolution. Brian, same question about this, free trade agreement that really also includes that focus on economic and technical cooperation. Can you tell the audience more about this, how you think it could enhance further collaboration, at least from your view, between Hong Kong and ASEAN?
Yes, Angie. Yeah, you're right that the ASEAN Hong Kong China Free Trade Agreement comprises a chapter on ecotech. And the objective is to enhance the benefits of the ASEAN Hong Kong China Free Trade Agreement through capacity building and technical assistance. So both sides, that is the ASEAN and Hong Kong China, agreed to conduct ecotech activities in 10 priority areas, which just name a few, like customs cooperation, small and medium enterprises cooperation, trade facilitation, logistics, and promotion and facilitation of investment. And the ecotech work program commences implementation in January 2020. So far, a total of 14 ecotech projects were approved, covering different priority areas, including customs cooperation, professional services, SME cooperation, and trade facilitation. And of which, one of them was submitted by the Philippines government, that a one-day online workshop is scheduled to take place in December this year to enhance understanding in trade in professional services and developing mutual recognition arrangements between Hong Kong and ASEAN. So we are confident that the continued collaboration between ASEAN and Hong Kong on ecotech will reinforce our close and amicable trade and economic cooperations in the long run.
Well, we have a very great group of questions coming from the audience, and I'll just include one right now, because as we talk about Hong Kong and RCEP and all of these significant relationships that are burgeoning as a result of RCEP and Philippines and across the region, we have a question from the audience, and I read: as a Philippines company based in Hong Kong, how can we speed up the RCEP agreements of Hong Kong? And I will leave it to both of you to answer. Allan, if you want to get started.
Well, if the question is, of course, Hong Kong's participation in RCEP, the provision is clear. So we have a process for purposes of accession. So first things first, number one, we have to make sure that by early 2022, RCEP will become effective or will come entry into force. And of course, after that, there is a period by which other economies will have to be entertained, but we have to agree first on the procedures. But as I have mentioned earlier, we see the potential of Hong Kong. We see the role of Hong Kong in the RCEP region. And I think that is a plus factor for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we got Philippine support. Brian, what are your thoughts? There's some real excitement in Hong Kong for inclusion to RCEP.
Yes, of course, it's just our wish to join RCEP as soon as possible. And in fact, the Hong Kong S.A.R. government indicated our interest in joining RCEP as early as in 2018. And the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, Mr. Edward Yao, wrote to RCEP member economies in November 2019, when negotiations concluded, as well as in November 2020, when RCEP was assigned to reiterate Hong Kong's keen interest in joining RCEP. Since this year, Secretary Yao and I have conducted face-to-face virtual meetings with the trade ministers of RCEP member economies, the Consul Generals in Hong Kong, including Mr. Raleigh, the Consul General of the Philippines, and respective chambers of commerce to seek their support for Hong Kong's accession to RCEP. And we are encouraged by the support we have received, in particular the support from ASEAN. and we look forward to joining the RCEP at the earliest opportunity after it enters into force. And Hong Kong companies, including SMEs, have manufacturing bases in the RCEP region, particularly those in the mainland and ASEAN, will enjoy possible tariff benefits and streamlined customs arrangements. And Hong Kong traders, supply chain operators, as well as service suppliers operating in the region will stand to benefit from better business environments with reduced compliance costs, simplified procedures, and enhanced transparency. In addition, RCEP will foster trade and investment relations within the region, thereby creating demand for financial and professional services in which Hong Kong has a strong competitiveness. Some of the benefits above will be enjoyed by the business community of Hong Kong when RCEP come into force. But to be able to enjoy the benefits to the full, there's no alternative to Hong Kong itself becoming a party to RCEP and be part of the wider and deeper economic integration under RCEP.
Allan, this question is for you as we kind of pull our scope back and try to understand the macro impact of RCEP. In terms of the global economy as it sits right now, how do you view this trade relationship? Arguably, one of the largest free trade agreements in history. How does this affect global economy?
Well, number one, Angie, we have to bear in mind that the center of economic activities right now is in Asia. It has transferred from North America, Europe to Asia. And RCEP accounts for 29% of global trade, 29% of total GDP, and a market of 2.3 billion people. Yes. And in addition to this macro data, it is also important to note that RCEP is an important foreign direct investment destination. It accounts for 33% global inward FDI and 47% global outward FDI. In addition to this, RCEP also accounts to 50% of the global manufacturing output, 50% of global automotive products, 70% of electronic products, and the main GBC hubs of China, South Korea, and Japan. Thus, there's no question that it is considered as the largest free trade deal in the world. And by its sheer size alone, RCEP can shape the direction of global economic activities. It can attract more investment in the region, even for non-RCEP countries. That is why we always tell our trading partners that RCEP is not just for RCEP parties. It is also for non-RCEP economies. They can take advantage of this biggest free trade area in the world right now. Thank you.
What are the new features, Allan, in RCEP that are not present in other free trade agreements?
Well, in terms of subject matters, of course, one important element there would be the chapter on small and medium enterprises. Mm-hmm. So this is unique in the sense that of all the ASEAN free trade agreements, this is the chapter where you have dedicated a chapter on small and medium enterprises. And the importance of this is that when it comes to economic and technical cooperation, when it comes to policy direction, our micro, small, and medium enterprises are assured that their participation in the global value chain will be properly addressed. That's one. Number two is that we have a comprehensive chapter on electronic commerce. And this is very timely because with what happened because of the pandemic, digital economy, digital transformation, and also online activities have been intensified in the process. And again, we need rules and disciplines, how to govern our conduct via the internet, for that matter. So how do we conduct trade? How do we conduct business via online? And the rules and disciplines embedded in the RCEP agreement under the e-commerce chapter will be very important. And that will offer also stability and predictability. Third is that I can highlight competition. Of course, in other trade agreements, we have competition chapter already. But in terms of commitment, what is important under the RCEP agreement is that RCEP parties are committed to adopt competition policies and that they are required to, of course, establish their own independent competition authorities. And what's the effect of that? Of course, it in a way guarantees a fair and equitable environment in the region. And also, which is very important, intellectual property. We can find this also in other trade agreements. But the value of having a comprehensive chapter on intellectual property in RCEP is that it reinforces other trade agreements wherein RCEP parties made commitment to. And again, that bolsters, again, the stability and predictability of the business environment in the region. And in the era of globalization, with an intensified activities on e-commerce, I think we cannot afford not to ensure the protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights.
The audience is super curious and interested, as it is really relevant to a lot of small and medium enterprises. And Brian and Allan, this question from the audience, really just to follow up what you reflected, Allan, just now, which is how can small and medium enterprises in Hong Kong and Philippines reap the benefits of Hong Kong joining RCEP? Brian, I'll start with you. I think even the first question from the audience reflected that as well, which is, I'm a Filipino, I'm a Philippines company based in Hong Kong. How does Hong Kong's inclusion in RCEP affect and help us?
Yes, Angie, Hong Kong's accession to RCEP we believe, will bring immense mutual benefits to the region and bring regional economic cooperation to new heights. In particular, Hong Kong's accession to RCEP will provide an additional platform for promoting trade and investment between ASEAN and Hong Kong on top of the ASEAN-Hong Kong-China Free Trade Agreement. Economically, Hong Kong is the Philippines' fourth largest merchandise trading partner in 2020, and the Philippines is Hong Kong's 18th major destination of outward direct investment as at end 2019. So given the complementary nature of our two economies, there is a huge potential for synergy and partnership between Hong Kong, China, and Philippine businesses. So Hong Kong's joining RCEP will help to fully realize such potential. And I would also like to highlight one of the salient features of RCEP, which Allan has not mentioned, is the unified set of rules of origin for the entire RCEP bloc. It means that there's no need to go through the tedious processes of checking the specific rules of origin criteria in each economy. Furthermore, the accumulation provision under the rules of origin chapter will allow businesses to include the use of materials sourced from any of the RCEP member economies in their production as originating content, thereby providing a wide array of choices for RCEP member economies to source new materials in a more efficient and cost-effective manner. So RCEP also include modern rules on the electronic commerce that Allan has just mentioned. All these could benefit all the SMEs in Hong Kong.
Another question from the audience. This one is directed to Allan. Allan, do you foresee a big change in Philippines trade policy as Philippines politics develop? For example, administration and changes there.
Well, in terms of trade policy, the country has been very consistent in embracing an open market for trade and investment. And this commitment, this policy direction are embedded in our various FTAs. And again, with the signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement and looking forward to its eventual concurrence by the Senate, because the Office of the President had already ratified the same, then again, it set the sails for purposes of where the Philippines is heading to as far as trade policies and investment policies are concerned. Now, if you will analyze and look into the ongoing reforms happening at the domestic scene right now, you will see some degree of consistency already. So in other words, I highlighted earlier, pending bills right now on the amendments of the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, Public Service Act, Foreign Investment Act. Basically, these are consistent with the open market trade and investment policies that we have adopted. And again, as I mentioned, the change in administration will, of course, in a way, change certain policies. But for business and investment, this is the beauty of having a free trade agreement, because you are incorporating in an international commitment your policy direction as far as trade and investment. And this is what investors are looking for. So if you are committed to certain trade agreements, then even if there is a change in administration, for example, in one's country, at least the investors are rest assured that the core rules and disciplines will be adhered to by that country. And that is what you call stability and predictability.
There is, of course, against the backdrop of global politics as well, and a lot of people mindful in the region about this, including this question. With the US-China trade friction intensifying, how do you think RCEP might impact this issue? Allan, do you want to start?
Okay. Well, number one, I think we have to bear in mind that in globalization, in international trade, there is always competition. The friction between China and the US, of course, I would say that that is normal in the sense that these are two big economies trying to, of course, have a strong niche in the economic spectrum. And if you will recall, even in the past, there was also a friction between two big economies. I think in the 70s, the US and Japan also had this share of what you call trade friction or trade war. So that's part of the dynamics when it comes to shifting of economic activities. And as I have mentioned earlier, since major economic activities have shifted to Asia, then basically all this research and development, production, manufacturing are gravitating towards Asia. Now, the advantage of having this RCEP is that notwithstanding this competition, we have laid down the fundamental rules and disciplines on how you will operate your business in the region. And I think for any business person or investors for that matter, this is what they are looking for. Competition will be there, but what is important is that the rules of the game are clearly defined.
They certainly are. Brian, do you have remarks here?
Thank you, Angie. I fully agree with Allan's observation that China and the US are the two biggest economies in the world. And so if there is trade friction between the two mega powers, there are bound to be impact on the world economy as a whole. So that's why RCEP has becoming even more important for the whole area in this region. So that is why Hong Kong is so keen to join RCEP as soon as possible to take the benefit of the FTAs that will bring new opportunities for Hong Kong's traders and economy. So we're pleased to note that the Philippines is very supportive for Hong Kong's accession to RCEP, and we hope that all other ASEAN members as well as all other RCEP members would also be supportive for Hong Kong in joining RCEP.
The dynamics absolutely are changing, as you've both noted. This is a question from the audience for Brian. Can you share any updates on the WTO dispute between Hong Kong and the US? And how would trade relations develop in RCEP if things between Hong Kong and US are not going well?
Okay, thank you, Angie. The dispute between Hong Kong, China, and the US over the origin marking issue has now come to the stage that the WTO has already set up a panel handling this dispute. And the panel has already has its meeting going on. So I'm afraid I'm not in a position to go into details about the discussion at the panel. So we believe that the panel would complete the discussion hopefully within this year or early next year, and they will issue a report. And by that time, we will know the outcome of how the dispute are going to be settled. But at the meantime, RCEP is a very important free trade agreement. So in fact, ASEAN has become Hong Kong's, I think, as a whole, the second biggest market of our trade. So the direction or the overall direction is to explore more new opportunities for RCEP economies. So I think joining RCEP will definitely help Hong Kong in the future, in the long run. So while settling the trade dispute with US is one thing, joining RCEP is also our main priority in the near future.
Brian, I think a lot of the audience is very eager to hear from you, and I'll share this question because it's a good follow-on. Hong Kong is already a free port, this person asks. What kind of benefits can Hong Kong expect from joining the RCEP other than trade measures?
Yes, in fact, being Hong Kong's accession to RCEP, where we believe will bring immense mutual benefits to the region. And although Hong Kong does not impose any tariffs, but well, I would say that Hong Kong enjoys close and investment relations with RCEP member economies. So Hong Kong's accession to RCEP will bring, as I've just mentioned, immense mutual benefits to the region and bring regional economic cooperation to a new height. For instance, Hong Kong's participation in RCEP, there will be increased business opportunities and investment flows for the manufacturing and services sectors of ASEAN. And we will also help further consolidate the regional supply chain through our provision of more access and choices of high quality services to enterprises in the region. So such mutually beneficial partnerships will be competitive and stand the best chance to reap the huge benefits of the 2.2 billion people market created by RCEP. And ASEAN businesses will also be able to enjoy further market access commitments that Hong Kong is prepared to commit under RCEP, on top of our commitments already made under the ASEAN Hong Kong China FTA. And in addition, Hong Kong is one of the major providers of foreign direct investment. So RCEP member economies are our important destinations of investment, accounting for over 50% of Hong Kong's total outward direct investment in 2019. So with Hong Kong's accession, the benefits offered by RCEP, including better market access and more legal certainty, will attract Hong Kong businesses to invest in RCEP member economies, contributing to the regional economic growth. So we believe that Hong Kong joining RCEP the benefits will be bigger than 1 + 1 is equal to 2. It's bigger than that.
Greater than the sum of its parts. I think there's so much anticipation and impatience almost for Hong Kong to already be a part of RCEP. We're hearing that very clearly. But the excitement and the enthusiasm for that is clear. And Allan, I'll let you answer the final question. From your perspective, from the Philippines perspective, how do you feel the ascension of Hong Kong to RCEP benefit the Philippines and vice versa?
Okay, thank you, Angie, for that question. As I mentioned earlier, we see Hong Kong as a strategic partner in many areas. And if eventually Hong Kong will be part of RCEP, then some of the areas that we see wherein Philippines and Hong Kong can work together would be on the areas of fintech, IP commercialization, maybe wealth management, and even infrastructure investments. And along this line, I think it's also important to take note that in the country, on these areas that I have mentioned, Hong Kong can take advantage of our legal and institutional regime. Legal regime in the sense that for IP, for example, IP commercialization, and fintech, and also online activities, e-commerce, we have existing laws already. Of course, we have the Intellectual Property Code, we have the E-Commerce Act, the Cybercrime Law, we even have the Strategic Trade Management Act, the Innovation Act, and the Startup Act. And this will be reinforced by our commitments in various free trade agreements. On the institutional aspect, the national government has been very aggressive in creating an atmosphere that is conducive for innovation, research and development, and of course, investment. That is why in the case of intellectual property, for example, we have a number of innovation technology support offices scattered all over the country. And our intellectual property office has partnered with various state universities and RDIs for this matter. The Department of Science and Technology and also the Department of Trade and Industry are collaborating together, and we have been working hard for IP commercialization. And one of the projects also of the department is, of course, the establishment of regional innovation centers, basically complementing all these initiatives that I have mentioned. And if you may have noted, in this time of pandemic, as I have mentioned, we continue to introduce reforms and setting policy direction. Thus, we have also launched our artificial intelligence roadmap and our e-commerce roadmap. And again, these areas are of interest to Hong Kong. And if I may stress also, Angie, services is one of the niche of the country. More than 50% of the service sector contributes, or rather, more than 50% of our GDP is being contributed by our service sector, particularly on business services. So, in other words, there's a lot of complementarities between Philippines and Hong Kong.
Well, we feel it. The excitement is palpable. I think there's, you could hear it from the audience. When is this going to happen? We hear there's process, but at the same time, we're talking about it in such great detail and learning about the minutiae of the impact that there is a great positive perspective on what this relationship means going forward with Hong Kong's accession to RCEP. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing with us as candidly as you could about the impact, the benefit to both Hong Kong and Philippines. Allan B. Gepty, Assistant Secretary for Industry Development and Trade Policy at the Department of Trade and Industry Philippines, thank you for joining us. And equally, Brian Low, Director General of Trade and Industry of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And audience, it was a great pleasure to be here. I'm Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief of Forkast.News. It was great to moderate this conversation. And Alice, my dear friend Alice, I will send it back to you. Alice, I believe you're muted. If you could turn on your microphone. And we do not hear Alice. Okay, well.
Angie, maybe I can step in here. This is Stephen Phillips from Invest Hong Kong. Ladies and gentlemen, it really falls to me to make some concluding remarks. I think we've had a fantastic content-rich session with lots of information and insights from our speakers, from Raleigh, from Allan, from Brian, and so very ably moderated by Angie. I think it's really clear that RCEP will fuel growth in our region as it becomes the genuine engine of global economic growth for a long time into the future. And clearly new opportunities are manifest in this context. I think RCEP will reshape global trade and investment flows. And I think if there's a key message to businesses is they really need to follow this very closely, pay attention to the changes, and therefore grasp the opportunities. So to put it colloquially, don't take your eye off the ball on what's happening here. Hong Kong, I think, has got a key role to play. Obviously, we aspire to be a member of RCEP, but our strategic geographic location between China and ASEAN, I think gives Hong Kong a very special role to play for businesses from many parts of the region and member countries of RCEP. Picking up on some of Allan's remarks, I think he highlighted quite a number of sectors where there are great opportunities for collaboration between the Philippines and Hong Kong. And I certainly think that there's lots of potential for significant deepening of that trade and investment relationship. Angie asked Brian about the impact of COVID on Hong Kong's economy. I'd just like to take the opportunity to mention a couple of facts that I think the audience might find interesting. We recently published 2 surveys that we do every year. The first shows that the number of international and mainland companies in Hong Kong stands at a record number in 2021, which is rather different to some of the headlines you might read in some media. So the facts show that we continue to attract leading businesses and startups from around the world. And on the startup front, we also saw a 12% increase in the number of startups in Hong Kong from 2020 to 2021. And 28% of them have got founders from outside Hong Kong, including Filipinos. And certainly as Invest Hong Kong, we've got a dedicated startup team that would be delighted to support any Filipino entrepreneurs or startups to grasp opportunities right here in Hong Kong. And more generally, if any company from the Philippines would like to have a chat with us, please drop me a note. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I'm sure that's true also of the Philippine consulate. Raleigh and his team would love to hear from Hong Kong companies that would like to capture those exciting opportunities in the Philippines for the very reasons that Allan was talking about, the strength that the Philippines has got. So to conclude, I think we've had a really stimulating discussion, some great insights. We need to turn this opportunity into reality. So once again, can I thank all of the speakers for their great insights, the organisers for pulling this together, but most of all to all of you for joining us this morning. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I hope you can hear me, but thank you. On behalf of Asia Society, I want to thank all of the speakers and especially Stephen for the closing remark. Stephen Phillips, Director General of Investment Promotion, Invest Hong Kong. And again, thanks my heartiest gratitude to Invest Hong Kong for collaborating with us on this event. And of course, the Philippine Consulate in Hong Kong. And thank you, our speakers, Brian, Allan, and thank you, Angie. And have a wonderful day and stay tuned for future Reimagining the Future series. And there will be one coming up on the 28th, and we hope to see you then. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.